you know, but more than that, I think my kind of constant connection with dyslexia has been, obviously, we meet our readers on Beano all the time, every week. Obviously, latterly, it's been done more digitally, but we speak to them. We have a great many dyslexic readers. So, you know, obviously, we speak to them, we learn more about dyslexia all the time, and it's a subject that really interests me. And, you know, obviously, I know everyone here today is probably going to have a lot stronger connections and know a lot more than me, but I think in terms of the question that you've challenged me with, Kathy, it's a really interesting one, and I hope I can give an answer that's thought-provoking and maybe some people agree with, maybe some people disagree, but I think it's definitely good food for thought. Yeah, I'm very proud to be asked along. I mean, it's nice to say that someone recommended me. Kathy, I didn't know you knew my mum, but that's really good. So I'm Mike. You've already done the introductions, but I guess in terms of my role, I've been the Beano editor, the editor-in-chief. I'm now what's called the editorial director, which is an incredibly highfalutin title that sometimes I'm a bit, whoa, what does it even mean? But the thing I've always been is a Beano reader, and you know, Beano, and I know it seems a bit obvious for me to say that in my position, but I mean, it literally was the first thing that I read by myself, and I think that's why, you know, this connects really nicely into today. And just if you see here, there's a little picture that one of the little treats of my job is that the gentleman in the photograph of me with me there holding the Bass Street sign, other than Dennis, of course, because I don't think we could describe Dennis as a gentleman, is David Sutherland. And David Sutherland still draws for Beano every week, and David's 88 nowadays. And when my little boy Elliot, who I mentioned just a little while ago, was born, David did me this lovely little painting, and that's one of my most treasured possessions, so I'm sharing that with you there today. You'll notice he got the gap between my teeth even very well, but other than that, I think it's a very flattering depiction, I would say, and I wish my hair was still as full-headed as that. So but that's 9 years difference. So yeah, I've always been a Beano reader, and so Kathy's challenged me, can comics like Beano act as a stepping stone to encourage dyslexic kids to read, and kids in general, indeed? And you know, what we have there, and the cover that you see in front of you is the hot author in Beano Town, IP Daily. There's a Beano joke in there somewhere, I'm sure some of you will notice. And she is she's a character we created last year when we were writing a new Beano fiction range. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And she's brilliant at bringing stories out from unusual places, and I think this ability to read and to get to a story is such a valuable thing for everyone. And even the notion of reading, when I talk about reading, I always think about it as a leisure pursuit, you know, and I bet you a lot of the people here today do that. We say, gosh, I've not really read that much lately. And we all, and a lot of us, well, certainly me, I take for granted all the general things that reading opens up to me, you know, just, you know, how to cook something, how to, you know, a leaflet that comes through the door, signage, everything like that. And you know, reading's all around us all the time. And I think, you know, we all know that earlier you can read and you can enjoy reading, the quicker you get into that pathway, and it opens so many doors. And we've always been beneficiaries of that, you know, because we love to we love to receive that feedback from people. And you know, the answer to the question very obviously is yes. You know, comics absolutely can encourage kids to read, and we know, you know, it only takes one positive reading experience to you know, to light that spark. And so who cares where it comes from? Obviously I'm a little bit biased, and so Beano would be my first recommendation, but I think you know, it's an unsurprising and it's a very short answer, 100% yes, but I'm going to try and go into a little bit more detail of what I see as in some ways the science behind it, in some ways you know, and the more important bit, as far as comics are concerned, the, you know, the effective sort of processes that bring children into a positive reading experience. So, as I said, don't take my biased word for it. These are some endorsements, and I really like these endorsements because they are completely random and ones that we've just picked up. I see a few people are kind of leaning in, so I'll just quickly run through them and give you a flavour of them. Just and I'm sure, Kathy, you're more than welcome to make these slides available to folks later on if they want to see things in detail. But David Williams, you know, it was the first thing he ever picked up to read for pleasure. That's a really important thing when we're talking about, you know, enjoyment. And he says it's influenced his characters in his books that he writes today, you know, even now. Ian Rankin, a quote that we probably can't use on the front of any of our literature, Beano was my gateway drug to reading. I don't know if we would use that terminology, but we're very proud when he says that Beano was a catalyst for him, you know, and having a love of reading and becoming the fantastic creator he is today. And he said he had barely any books, but he used to read the Beano and the Dundee. So again, it's this idea that, you know, that some people are really fortunate and they have bookcases full. You know, Ian Rankin had a few comics lying around, he read them, he loved them, and the rest is history. And he said it's affordable literacy for kids, which is very nice. Claudia Winkleman, she just says Beano was the most important thing for her, and she read it very seriously and silently. And that's perhaps not the image you sometimes have of Beano because of the way her characters act, but a lot of our readers do enjoy it that way. They just embrace the world and they you know they fall into it and they immerse themselves in it. And so again, you know, that those are ingredients that make for a really positive reading experience. And then particularly relevant, I think, to speaking to you all today, we have the designer Paul Smith, who's always been a good friend of Beano, and you know, he is dyslexic, and he says he doesn't read very often, but he can't live without the Beano. So, you know, this is really good, and like I said there, we know that the earlier a reading habit kind of takes off for kids, the better it is, because it opens all these doors just a little bit earlier. It helps them with their education. I mean, the science and the stats, you guys will probably know them all a lot better than me, just from the point of view that you're so immersed in you know, making things better for you know, dyslexic people. But I think this is really interesting. This is something that I read a couple of weeks ago, and it's new research from the NLT. And it's the old economic imperative. So, you know, it's all very well me speaking about how important it is for kids to love books and love reading. And again, as I said right at the start, I obviously, you know, from I guess a business point of view, I would have a bias. But, you know, as a parent and just as a, you know, as a person, it's really important. But I think that this stuff like this is the catalyst for real change, because it's demonstrated the economic value of reading for pleasure for the first time ever. And statistically, by supporting kids reading outside school, there could be £4.6 billion boost to the UK GDP across the next 30 years. And there's an underlying stat in that as well that I think is very powerful. But by encouraging kids to read for pleasure every single day for a short time, we are talking about an average lifetime earnings boost of £60,000 per kid. Now that's just now, that'll only keep growing. Now, if you think about it, when I was little, my mum, you know, at birthday times and stuff, you know, my little sister and me, we would always get exactly the same in terms of value, and it, you know, it's staggering to think that one child we could lock them into having less by maybe not supporting them as much as we can do at an early level, and I think that's very powerful. And I think as well, you know, another thing that I actually read just last night when I was thinking about this is that reading for pleasure and reading, if you read for only 6 minutes a day, so we're talking about, you know, reading for pleasure every day, only 6 minutes leads to a 68% reduction in stress levels. So, and that's for me or you, and for a kid. So the corollary of that, the corollary of that, unfortunately, is that if you cannot read or you find it difficult to read, not only do you not benefit from that, but we know the stress. I mean, from an empathetic point of view, you know, I find it very easy to read English, but if I go to a foreign country and I struggle to read something, it can become stressful and difficult. And I think when you think about things like that, it helps put you in the shoes of this problem, but also, you know, we all know, and you all know, that there are things that we can do, and these effective processes of reading for pleasure are absolutely one of them. Now, Beano's encouraged generation of kids to realise reading can be fun. We've been very fortunate in that. It's almost been a serendipitous sort of thing where we maybe didn't set out to do that, but we've increasingly realised that, and we've increasingly leveraged it. And I think even the fact that, you know, I'm being allowed and invited to speak today is an example of that. You know, when Beano was launched, as I'm going to tell you in a minute, there was a massive tumult from parents and teachers about it being a bad thing. But you know, this story here tells you where we've, you know, from the original comic in 1938 through to our massive circulation of 2 million a week during the 1950s, right up to this year, where we're celebrating Dennis's, probably our most famous character's 70th birthday. We did some analysis a year ago. I think it's 28.8 million people alive in the UK today have enjoyed reading Beano at some point in their lives. So we have this amazing network of connectivity, and I think this trust, we did analysis, we're more trusted than the BBC, we're more trusted than Disney. I think it's because we have a sense of humour, and we're probably seen as being a little bit more ramshackle than those organisations, but nevertheless, this is the case, and I think people trust us to, you know, to prove that reading can be fun. And like I said, it was quite serendipitous, because this is the team that originally imagineered Beano, and the floor at DC Thomson. So in the centre of Dundee, there's a massive orange building, Meadowside. And obviously DC Thomson that produced Beano. We also have newspapers like the Sunday Post, magazines like the People's Friend, and you know, a whole host of publications that, you know, the Courier on a daily basis. And comics had been a really successful thing for DC Thomson. But the reason I'm calling these people reading revolutionaries is because of the type of comics we produced and the type of comics kids read back in the day. Now, they were very different to what you see nowadays, and the reason I say these people were revolutionary is because they completely changed that, and they came from quite a revolutionary background, because Dundee was and probably still is, it's a wonderfully you know, almost anti-authoritarian city, and I always maintain it's the only place Beano could ever have been produced. And you see the gentlemen who were actually you know, quite young in the picture you saw in the slide before, they were all involved in some shape or form in what is the schoolboys strike of which was a national phenomenon of kids rallying against conditions in school not being as good for them as they might be. And Dundee was the place in the whole of the UK where this was most prevalent. And the reason for that, again, if we delve back deeper, I'm a historian, was that the jute factories in Dundee that were where it was predominantly the workforce was made up of women and kids. Dundee had the highest level of school exemption certificates in the whole UK. They constantly would go on strike for better conditions because the conditions were completely appalling. And what this did was this built up this culture of pushing back against things the way they were and seeing if we could do things in a better way, especially for kids and families. And this is what happened with Beano, because these guys came into a business where these types of comics were really successful. This was called the Big Five. It was the DC Thomson story adventure comics. And they were really dense and they were brilliant stories. And I've been fortunate enough in our archive, and some of the, your members here today may have read some of these to enjoy some of these. And the storytelling in them was absolutely fantastic. But the format of them was very different to what I would have understood as a comic as a kid. And here's an example. This is the advert for Beano the week before it was published. And this is what one of the comic pages looked like. And they were prose stories, and look how tiny the writing was. And don't get me wrong, these were tremendously successful, but it was genuinely controversial when Beano came out. Following after Dundee had come out first. Dundee had come out the Christmas before, and then Beano came out. It was a controversial time, and parents and teachers said, what we're doing is it was almost that we were suddenly creating intellectually inferior reading material for kids. It was too easy. It was not good for them. It was, it's the old kind of penny dreadful argument. Now, the actual content was humorous as well, which was different. And you can see, and I think this is where we start to get to the crux of Kathy's question about, the stepping stone and whether we can encourage, reading for pleasure. And in comics, the actions speak kind of louder than words. And right after Beano was launched, obviously, we had World War II. And what you have here is, this is part of a front page comic strip at the time. Beano kept producing once every fortnight during this time. And you can see right away the story is being told by images alone. There's no text whatsoever here, but you can see what's happening because there's a really clear structure to it. This is comics brass tacks here. This is the setup on the left hand side, and this is the result. And what you have is the sequential art, and this is where it's particularly relevant for dyslexic children. It really helps the order of the stuff. There is no need to decode the reading experience here, and decode the words, I should say. So the reading experience has an element of complexity removed from it. However, there is still masses to unpack. It's in a slightly more suitable way to do that. And you see the emotion on the characters' faces. You've got Big Ego the ostrich, Beano's first ever cover star, and you can see the whole flavour of the scene and the detail is there. But what it allows a reader to do here, any reader, is to engage really quickly and effectively. So we've got the skill to read. The cognitive process are done, is covered in comics, but it's the effective processes that generate the will to read that I think we do really, really well. And we did this, like I say, without realising it. And here's another example, where we have a much more dense experience. Now, this could be slightly more difficult for a dyslexic person to read because there's a lot more going on. There's a lot of text. Nevertheless, the philosophy that we have on Beano and a lot of comic creators have is that the story should still be recognisable from the image alone. And then the thing that's good is the image gives a memorable callback, obviously, to a dyslexic reader, and again helps them order it, fashion it out, and then they can unpack it bit by bit, because the panels themselves, that's what we call the boxes that the comics are in. The panels are like chunks. You know, they're the little servants, and within them, the balloons encourage the writers and the creators to have a discipline about how much text we use. And what this does is, it just breaks down the experience a little bit and makes it more engaging and slightly less intimidating. And again, you see the wonderful expressions and the emotion and just the action. You can tell what's happening without actually reading it. And then if you want to go back and unpack the words, that's great and that's fine, and that gives you confidence. I've always called it a scaffolded experience, because I think that's what the images do. And this is the thing, you know, these comics that I've just shown you were getting produced at the time, where this is the Middleside building I was mentioning earlier. It was absolutely, you know, under threat, so much so that legend has it, the editorial team that were back at Beano HQ at the time were on a Nazi hit list. The gentleman you saw in the image that I showed you a short while ago, they all actually went away and participated in the war. So and thankfully they all came back fitting well. But these were getting produced then, and you can see how things they branched out from this, and we you know, we started out, we had, you know, a mix of black and white and colour, but you see not so much has changed as we go into the 50s, and then, you know, my first decade in the Beano, the 70s, you still see these images, very kind of curated, limited text, you know, words I think that are quite recognisable, and you know, so again, this the way the comic's constructed is a good thing. And of course, books, you know, we talk about books, and books are always seen on a kind of higher level as comics, but of course Beano, you know, 2 years in, produced its first book, the Beano book, and the Beano annual is still the, you know, the #1 Christmas annual. It's been #1 Christmas, I have to confess, for 9 years out of the last 10, because One Direction defeated us 1 year. So that, you know, you're always there to be shot down. But so this was the first Beano book that I'm showing you there. And so the secret formula, just again, there's a little bit more copy on this frame, but I just wanted to summarise it all. And the image there is a Beano we did once, where we used emojis to communicate a story, and again, it's like it's a complete visual approach, but the reading experience and the leaning into it and unpacking the information's all in there. So short text and the visual support that I've talked about, confidence and motivation to read and to complete the story. We're not, I have to be honest, overtly educational, but we do have a programme called Beano for Schools that I've got a link to at the end. But I think what we do, and I think, you know, the thing that I said about parents and teachers all being a little bit horrified when Beano launched, as it not being, you know, such a deep reading experience. The higher order skill of inferential reading, you know, those character pictures that I showed you, the expressions on people's faces, is really well supported by comics. A Beano comic can be read in around an hour, which I think gives you that chance to get that sense of accomplishment, to having, you know, to start to define yourself as a reader. And strip by strip, 3-minute chunks. Now, the good stuff, I feel that we've done, since 2016, we've also added things that we call mini strips, and literally they are, I've got a slide next where I just go through these things and show you them. We took advice from the NLT on engaging more reluctant readers, including dyslexic children, and they advised us also on, you know, our kind of curated word choice and sentence construction, and we made sure that you know, these mini strips are what we call super readable. Jokes themselves, we call them micro reads, which is, you know, a joke's a story. When we do joke writing sessions with kids in classrooms, and we describe a joke as a story. It's got the beginning, it's got the, you know, the setup, and then the ending. and again, we feel there's that accomplishment and relevance. And we've got things like visual puzzles. And on the next slide, you can just see, you know, we've got the mini strip on the top left, a visual puzzle you can dip into, jokes on a page, and then on the right hand side at the bottom of all our story pages we have these little jokes, so you can see right at the bottom of that. So again, these are these kind of micro reading experiences, but all within the same curated comic that you can read every week. And it can, you know, you become a Beano reader, but also you become a reader. And we also like to empower Beano readers, because every week, and this is something we probably don't make enough about it. We've done it since 2016. A reader takes over as editor every week, and what we like for kids to see in that is that, you know, not only can they read Beano, but they can write Beano, and it's absolutely theirs. And you know, if you can see yourself doing something, you can, you know, you can really aspire to do that thing in a really positive way. So you know, we do that right through the comic, where the reader makes decisions. You know, we obviously support them. It's not me taking a holiday and leaving it to somebody else to do it, but they make really key decisions, and they advise us. And you know, we speak to kids all the time. Can train your brain to remove that. Some of you might recognise the numbskulls here, the uncomfortable associations. I mean, I anecdotally said that thing about, you know, that kind of pressure of not being able to read something, not being able to understand something. For me, somebody who, well, I would have to, you know, I'm probably fair to say I'm an accomplished reader, because, you know, I do it as part of my job every day. And I think the comics, by having this positive experience, can take this away. And again, Kathy's word, the stepping stone to the positive connections, you know, images for the context, we can match the words, you know, the puzzle becomes less puzzling because of the contextual information. And we you know, your mind fills the blanks. And again, you know, this idea that especially a dyslexic child it provides this structure for processing info. Now, the X factor I feel that we have in Beano is the humour, the visual humour. It reduces the stress, it releases the endorphins. We know this calms you. There's the motivation to get the joke. So there's that. The story's not complex and Beano, because there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, but there's the motivation to get to the end because you want to see what happens. And the jokes themselves are bite-sized. And the other advantage we have, we're weekly as a comic, and we have these relatable characters that everyone knows. So I'm just coming up to closer to the end now, Kathy, in case you're worried. Almost half of the kids in the UK are defined as reluctant readers right now. But I think sometimes the term reluctant readers, it's a perception that comes from parents, teachers, and unfortunately from the kids themselves. And I think Beano and comics in general can influence the kids themselves. You have this little comic strip with Dennis here. He's not wanting to go to the library. He says, reading's such hard work. You have to follow it with your eyes. I prefer entertainment that goes into my eyes, just like bam, in there. And you see, he's just a little bit reluctant. So what we do is we, you know, like I said before, cognitive processes, the decoding, the comprehension, we touch upon the skill, but it's the will, this idea that the effective processes that make kids feel that I am a reader, they define it as something they can be proud about and something they can be confident in saying. I think that's the key to kids, you know, reading at home by themselves and regularly, and, you know, reading for pleasure in essence. And, you know, we were guilty of it ourselves. You know, this is Dennis using books for pleasure a few years ago. You'll notice it's the old style Dennis. We've got him shooting them here. We've got him using them as weapons. So you know, we've got a responsibility. You know, we benefit from kids reading, obviously, and so nowadays we have stuff like this. This is Beano Town Library that we created a number of years ago, and obviously Beano Town's a slice of life that's larger than life. So we have this wonderful expression of it. But we asked kids at the time when we were creating it, we said, what should be in it? And you know, we've got every joke book, every kids book ever, every dodge book, every homework answer. It's the type of books, and we've got this experience, and we've worked with librarians, and we know that the attitude it's completely different to from when I was a kid. It's so wonderful. Libraries are such wonderful places, and you know, we really encourage our readers into them. So more stepping stones. You can enjoy the whole reading journey in Beano Town. Again, the familiar thing. These books that we've read. That this isn't a promo, but we called them Boomix, and the reason we called them Boomix is because they're a mix. They've got more words than the average comic, but a lot more pictures than the average book. And again, it's just this additional stepping stone. We have the thing, we have the boombox, we have sound effects that you can access for free on your computer, and you can either read along and play along. And again, it's just encouraging this positive experience. And you can see that, you know, the ultimate Beano adventure. So it's a little bit more words, giving this confidence, told with funny pictures. And you can see, again, the stepping stones. You can hop off, you can, you know, you can read the Beano comic, like I say, takes you an hour. You can read these books, you know, that takes you maybe a little bit longer, and then you've got an annual and our ultimate collections that are just loads of comic strips put together, and it's this proud identity. I'm a Beano reader, and then you can take the Beano right out of that, and you can replace any comic in there or any book. You know, I'm a reader. And they can come back to this place. It's Beano Town. Every kid should recognise this is a town. We consolidated experiences from kids all around the world that they have in their hometowns, and we feel that they're all contained within this vista. We've got the characters. Every kid should be able to see themselves in Beano Town. We have a lot more diversity and inclusivity than we've had before. An interesting thing you might ask is, you know, are any of the Beano characters dyslexic? And what we like to do is we leave kids to project their own selves onto our characters. So I would say any of our characters or all of our characters could be dyslexic. You know, it's the character you identify with that would. So we think it's more powerful to leave things like that. But you know, there's always other opportunities. This is some research we've been doing recently about using balloons. And that's what we call them, balloons, the speech bubbles. It's a term that we've always used. We have balloonists. That's their job that work on Beano, and we've been doing some work on this, and this is obviously using the different colours, of ink to make them stand out. And of course, we have an editorial checklist that's in the notes of this slide, and you could peruse later if you would like to see them from Kathy, where we have a number of things we do to make the reading experience easier. And you can see here we have the less traditional form of font, where we have for comics, that is, where we have the capitalization at the beginning of sentence and sentences, and for names that you know can be another helpful thing to do. So finally, I just wanted to say, you know, some great options for more reading for everyone today is we've got Beano for Schools, where, you know, I said that we don't overtly do education, but that's where we do education, and you know, there's some really nice resources for kids there, including a joke writing course, and also a lot of you might know Deco Comics and by Rossi Stone, but you know, these are comics that are specifically written with an educational basis, and Rossi himself is dyslexic and used comics as a way to study for his exams, and now, you know, produces what would probably be the gold standard of comics for specifically for dyslexic children. But like I say, I think every comic can give a positive reading experience, and I think a positive reading experience opens the door to so many things. And yeah, I think I think that there's a lot of work we can still do at Beano, and I think there's a lot of work society in general can do, and like going back to that economic imperative, I think it's important that everybody does it. So thank you for letting me speak to you. And if anyone has any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to attempt to answer them.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was absolutely fascinating. It's made me want to go out and buy a Beano straight away and go back down. I used to love the numbskulls, so and the Bash Street Kids. So I love that. Can I ask you, Mike, if you could stop sharing your screen and then we can see everyone, and then we see it open up for questions. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed that, and I'm sure others here did. We've got about 10-15 minutes for questions, so if you've got any questions, could you put up your hand or put it in the chat, and our team here will try and spot you. I'm sure there are plenty of questions. Mike, I think you got your hand up there. Mike Gibson, sorry, not to confuse you, Mike. Having problem unmuting, I think.
Is that it?
That's it. Well done, Mike.
Fantastic. I love these pullovers. What's the origin of the, is there a story about why it's a black and red stripe? I know it's a pathetic question, but it's quite interesting.
No, it's not. It's a really good question, and it's a really, I'm not saying that I've got a really good answer, but I love the story behind it, Mike. What used to happen when Beano first got produced, we often see images of the old comics, and we see these dynamic, beautiful colour schemes, but it was only the outer 4 pages that were ever colour at the beginning. And what would happen when a new character got launched, they would always originally, in Beano, they would get launched on a black and white half-page strip, and it would be tested. And even today, we still get so much correspondence every week. We still get hundreds of actual letters, and we get thousands of emails from kids. And what would happen is, depending on the reception to the character would maybe get promoted. Now, when they got promoted, they got put on the pages that had red ink as well. So red ink was the next most accessible colour. So most of the pages were black and white. Some were red, black and white. And then you had the colour front pages. So what actually happened was, Dennis originated on the black and white page. He was instantly very, very popular, and in his first ever strip, he's actually wearing a shirt and tie, which seems bizarre, obviously nowadays. But by a couple of months in, he had the jumper, and we always said his gran was still knitting it for him when he started the comic. He had the jumper, and then he became so popular when he got moved to the red and black page. It was a black and white jumper. The white was coloured red and black. Exactly the same thing happened with Minnie. Now, all these kid characters, Minnie, Dennis and Roger, who are synonymous with the red and black, they all came about in the 1950s, but they were all in the comic by 54. Them and the Bash Street Kids too. And so they all went straight into this red and black colour. Now, we could change the colour to absolutely anything relatively shortly thereafter, but they were so strong, and it became really quite iconic. And even I was doing a thing on a radio station last year, and somebody came on and they told me the story of the rock star Kurt Cobain, and he had seen somebody wearing a Dennis jumper, and it was actually a fan club jumper, an old fan club jumper at a gig, and his wife at the time had Courtney Love had purchased it off the fan for I think it was £30, which was quite a big amount of money at the time. And then obviously relatively recently it sold for gosh, I think it was £80,000 or something like that as a piece of iconography. But you know, you had the punk movement adopted it as well, you know, and you know, various designers. I talked about Paul Smith. He's actually never done a red and black jumper, but you know, it's something that comes back to the catwalks again and again and again. And we always claim it, you know, Dennis wore it first. Minnie thinks she suits it better. But we always claim Dennis first. Unfortunately, we've never been able to license it.
Oh dear. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we did way back when I started, and this was I've been at DC Thompson for it'll be 25 years soon. There was a bit of a Beano was quite early on the licensing and the franchise thing. It was just around the same time as Star Wars, and they got onto it quite early. And they did look at trademarking red and black stripes, but it wouldn't fly. So it would have been great, but no.
Yeah, I've just been on Amazon because I quite fancy getting one. My grandson is 8; he's a great fan of the Beano, and I was thinking about getting him one of these pullovers for his Christmas, you know. And I went onto the website, and there seems to be hundreds of outlets for Dennis the Menace pullovers. You know, it's quite amazing. I'd never thought of it that before.
It's just that it never goes out of fashion.
Yeah.
I think,
okay, thanks very much, Mike.
No, great to speak to you, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I was going to say, I think Katie's mother is doing a line in knitting and jumpers, so you might want to speak to Katie.
£80,000, Mike.
yeah, fair price.
Thanks very much for that. That's a really interesting question. Andy, you've got your hand up.
Hi, Mike. I really enjoyed your talk, and it really brought me back to my early teens when I was 13 and 14, maybe 12 and 13. And at school, I was a slow and reluctant reader. And at school, we were reading David Copperfield, which is difficult language, you know, about 700 pages, and I hated it. And I took refuge in reading the Beano and other comics. So I absolutely you loved it. So you've really taken me back to to those years. My question is, how do you come up with your jokes?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, first thing I would say, Andy, about how the little anecdote you gave there is, it's really different in schools nowadays, obviously, but I mean, I think I see a really positive side of it, because the teachers that invite me and you know, my friends at work to come into school obviously recognise that comics are a cool thing for like you say, to encourage reading. But certainly I was the same as you, and I mean, it feels a bit mean to say it, right, because I was very similar. It was we were getting you know, books that I like now, but at the time it was just too much. And my teacher would say, you'll not get a job working in comics, right? And obviously, but I can distinctly remember it, it makes me sound as if I'm being smug now, but there was definitely a resistance to it back then. And even when my background before I worked for Beano was I worked in teenage magazines, and what we did, we went into schools and we did a lot of market research, and that's how we really connected with the reader all the time, and we knew what to write about. When I went to Beano, and one of the things, Beano always got written just by you know, a team in an office, and there wasn't the research as such, and we wanted to do a little bit more research. Originally when I went, so this is 25 years ago kind of thing, no, about 20 years ago, Beano, schools wouldn't let us come in, you know, because they thought we were going to, I don't know, wreck the place or be a bad influence or anything like that. So it's totally great now, it's changed. We can't keep up with all the invitations, but I think the thing about how we write our jokes, the first thing I would say, and I always say this to kids, there's no such thing as a new joke, really. But what you do is that what they call it in the business is there's lots of alts, and it's alterations to the kind of formula, you know, the setup, and it's kind of like dissecting a frog, you know. Once you start explaining it, you know, once you start dissecting it, it's effectively dead. and I think the jokes thing, there's several techniques that we use, and I think the term that I said a couple of times when I was speaking earlier was we exaggerate, and there's so much humour in exaggeration, the contradiction of sizes, and just thinking about things from an opposite direction. I was working on something last night, and it was a commercial project for a business that has bowling alleys, temp and bowling, and they were wanting to explain their tips in a more exciting way to kids, and use less less jargon, less complex words and stuff, and it was really simple, just to do the you confound the expectation. And one of the ones was Minnie, who can be a bit rumbustious. She does this most perfect bow, and she's so delighted with it, and you think she's executed the most perfect piece of technical thing. And then in the next frame, what I did was, so she hadn't aimed it down the aisle, she'd aimed it the other way to where everyone was standing behind her, and you don't see that in the first picture. So you can just do something like that, where you take the expectation that way, and then you whip it back. And I think the thing about it is, and what I always find easiest is that when you collaborate with other people, it's a lot easier, because it becomes really enjoyable. But we have we did this thing, this course, and we called it Spag Walls, and it was we were teaching spelling, punctuation, and grammar through joke writing, and we showed how important those skills were. And what we did was, myself and my friend Craig, who work on Beano every day, we wrote the first draft, said, look, you do this, and then we hired a teacher to come and make sure it really worked for a classroom, and more importantly worked for other teachers, and the way we formatted it and stuff like that. And it's kind of quite, it's just kind of quite technical, and I think it's just trying and writing a lot. I mean, I have to be honest, when I said there's nothing like no such thing as a new joke, I'm looking under my desk and I collect joke books, and like I've probably got about 24. And I don't sit and open them up and say, oh, I can put that in Beano next week, but I do love I don't know, I talked about endorphins, and we speak to people about the science, and we do a lot of child psychology, and it does do that thing. I think reading a joke, it's almost like the buzz that people probably get from social media. You see people scrolling all the time and little nuggets, and I think a joke kind of does that, and possibly in I would argue in a more positive and rewarding way. But yeah, it's just playing around with words and language and stuff. And I think it's one of the things when we're thinking about writing for, there is that incentive to get the joke. So for a dyslexic kid, for example, to get the joke visually and then get the joke in text. But we also have to be wary that a lot of the jokes we do are sometimes what I would say about humour is that we know that your sense of humour is set by the time you're 7 years old, right? Which is kind of the first age you do the Beano. The only thing that changes as grown-ups is our frame of reference gets wider. And what we've got to be careful of as writers is that we don't assume that our frame of reference is as accessible to kids. So, we might make a joke about a pun based on, a French cheese or something like that, but the kids might not know, what they might not have heard of it. They might not be able to read that. They might not know how to pronounce it. So that's where you have to edit yourselves. And again, this is the beauty of working on something like Beano. It's an iterative process. It's a team. So when we write a script or a story in the comic, I always like to write it with a pencil first, freehand. I've got like a big pad I keep in front of me, and I just go do and I draw all the dots together, and then you get it into a form, and then you describe the picture. So you describe the picture, and that's when you start you see extra things in your mind, to be funny things, and or maybe if they looked happy and they looked sad, or you know, and how you can start to remix it. But then the magical bit is when I send it to the artist, because unfortunately for me, I can't draw. And I say unfortunately for me is because we meet a lot of kids, and they're always really excited, and I always feel that I disappoint them a little bit when I can. And so what I did was I taught myself to draw Dennis really well. The unfortunate thing about that is Dennis isn't every kid's favourite character. So it worked for a while where I thought, great, I'm really doing well here. But the amazing bit for us is we send it away, then it comes back and it's illustrated. But the beautiful bit about it is the artist is able to add their own visual jokes in as well. Then when it comes back, it goes around the whole team. The whole team then maybe add their own jokes on, or they maybe tell me where I've made a joke that kids aren't going to get. So it's just, I guess, where we get our jokes from, everywhere, anywhere, and most of all, and I say this all the time, but it's genuinely true. It is from the readers and the things the readers say to us, and most importantly when we meet them, because that lets us tap into the kids' language, the way they speak, the things that they find funny. Because I mean, a lot of the gross stuff, right? Personally, I'm not a massive fan of, but when you go, and kids just love it, and you know, you have to give your audience what they want, you know, and you know, it's okay for me being, it's just, I always find that a bit icky, but that's me. I mean, maybe I'm too snobby nowadays, I don't know, but yeah, so as long as you follow the reader, I think it's easy to come up with jokes. And you know, writing the books has been great for us because you can do more expansive sorts of jokes, but then you can still do the visual sort of thing too, but you can do the callback that starts, and then there's always something that you can connect back, and it makes you feel as if you've been clever. But the great thing about it is, and you don't always get this feedback, but if you speak to a reader or a parent or somebody, and they say they felt so clever when they got it, and that's the most rewarding thing, because you've put in that kind of effort, and it maybe doesn't get spotted at the first time, but it does get spotted when they go back and look at it again. And I think that's the other thing, kind of, I never said it when I was speaking, because I was thinking a lot about this over the last couple of weeks when I was preparing for this. It's one of the great things about Beano. We were talking about doing a thing for World Recycling Day and how you could recycle your Beano, and it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work was because kids keep their Beano, and they keep it so they can, it's partly a collection thing, but also it's so they can read it again and they can go back to it. So I think that's the reason we put so many wee jokes in the background, because you want people to find them, because that was the thing that I liked when I was little. So you're only ever a kind of custodian when I was little. So you're only ever a kind of custodian on Beano. So you get to, you know, work on it for a little while. And I mean, it's going to be 85 years in 2023. So I mean, that's an amazing kind of legacy. So you're only involved in it and for a small period at that time, and you know it's going to keep going. So you want to continue all the things that you liked, but you know, I mean, it's obviously it's you have to compete, I guess, for kids' attention, because there's so many wonderful things kids can get involved in and do, and access to technology and stuff. And you know, so we try and embrace that and use technology where we can use it to support what we've always done. But again,
Mike, thank you.
Sorry, Kathy.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to have to be the baddie here because
Andy asked me such a complex question.
Exactly, I know. Thank you so much, Mike. That was such an interesting talk, and you really did rise to the challenge of answering the question that I asked really, really impressively. So thank you so much.